Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Chris from AppSumo in the Remote Work Academy, and today I'm joined with Aiden Carroll, and I am very excited for this conversation. We did a little pre-interview conversation last week, and I was just like so over the moon with how high quality and interesting Aiden is, and really giving quality, actionable stuff for people. So we're going to be diving into that today. A little bit of housekeeping. One, we will be sending out this replay, so if you got to pop out early for any reason, you miss anything, I imagine we're going to be going through a ton of awesome stuff, and you're going to be wanting to take notes. So if you miss anything, we'll get that replay out to you. And if you have any questions as we're going through this in regard to like advertising, Google, Facebook, all of that, feel free to drop those in the Q&A box, and we'll circle around to some of those questions towards the end, maybe even sprinkling it a bit throughout. But that is all I got. I'm going to give Aiden a bio right now. Let me read through this to introduce everybody to him. So he's worked with numerous brands, mainly global, in shaping and delivering their digital advertising strategies, not to neglect making sure those strategies stick, with a ton of upskilling. To date, he's been involved in campaigns producing 20 plus awards, from the Cannes Lions to the Webbies. He also happens to be a judge. He's more than a little bit obsessed with the technology sector, and even more so with the future of education and communicating ideas. He's trained over 65,000 marketers to date from over 75 countries and over 30 Fortune 500s. He sometimes speaks at international conferences, but only the good ones. That's a heck of a bio.
It's honest, I guess, Chris. When you read it back to me, it makes me sound a bit awful as a human being, but it's all fact-based, and fact-based is fine as far as I'm concerned. So.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you for joining this morning. This is I'm really excited about this, as I was saying, and I would love to hear a bit more about kind of your background, about what got you to the point where you have achieved all of these different things.
To be honest, it's a bit of a curious story. There's a lot of chat around the Tokyo Olympics being postponed until next year at the moment. And I kind of got into this game way back with the London Olympics in mind. I had a small social media agency, and I ended up in that particular recession thinking about, look, how can we give support to people, give support to clients around things that we but maybe can't afford anymore on a retainer basis, which I'm sure anyone who runs an agency at the moment can relate to. So what we did at that stage was start to productize some of our offering into education products, so that we could keep the doors open really and get lots of people new jobs and so forth. And I ended up being headhunted by Google to build some of their early education products at that point. Mostly luck, total Hail Mary. And that's sort of where the journey into digital education for me began, particularly. And over that course of time, I've been involved with the Google Analytics Academy. I built the original Squared program. I've been involved with Academy for Ads. I'm General Assembly's lead digital marketing instructor. So quite a few different pots these days anyway.
Yeah. Let us know in the comments, everybody. Are you guys currently running ads for your business? Whether you are, or someone on your team, or you're outsourcing it to an agency, or you are an agency, let us know, because I was really surprised when I was talking to Aiden about kind of how everybody's doing it wrong and how there's a lot of room for improvement. And so we're going to be going through some of that stuff. But Aiden, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you're seeing out there when it comes to doing online advertising?
Honestly, myself and my business partner, particularly Jill, is a bit of a geek too. She's in the background there lurking. It's her birthday. Happy birthday, Jill. Hopefully I'll do justice to your opinion too. We, kind of as I said in our pre-chat chat, Chris, I taken screen grabs of various different ads from lots of different companies, some very well-funded, some very large, some very small. And obviously, I kind of have a bit of a bias in that I make judgments on the basis of how well people are tracking things. Mm-hmm. So I to myself, hey, if you are not, strictly speaking, tracking a property, can you be trusted to do anything? And that's just purely me. But what we did discover in this process, Jill and I, we do lots of consulting for VCs. And of course, naturally, as we said in our pre-chat, if someone's giving you money to grow your business, you need to tell them what you're spending the money on. If someone cuts you a check in Series B for $10 million, you need to say, hey, we spent $2.5 million on advertising. Here's what worked, here's what didn't. And what we were finding most of the time was that people were going, I don't know, we sold stuff. Which marketing channel is bringing in most sales? one of them, Shopify. So a lot of the issues that we were seeing were more around not kind of willfully not tracking things. It was just what, you don't know what you don't know. So it's kind of those unknowns, I guess, across the space. And at the moment, with a lot of the free ad grants around the whole COVID-19 situation from Google and from Facebook, we're seeing a massive uptick in people jumping on platforms potentially for the first time. So in Facebook ads, within the ad exchange, and indeed within Google across display and across search. And actually, a lot of this stuff is just not tracked properly. So it's kind of, I'm spending money because someone's giving it to me, but I'm not actually really thinking about what is working, what is not working. Equally, the other end of things is this idea of cost efficiency. I always say, when I do my programmatic training for Google, to big clients and small clients, is essentially there's two things here. We're either doing effectiveness, so actually our marketing is working harder, or we're doing efficiency, our money is working harder. And both of these two things together hopefully are a 1-2 punch. But if you're missing a piece, if you are not tracking effectively, you can't possibly be efficient. So you can build the best campaign in the world. You can build, excuse the terminology, the best possible lemonade stand. But if you don't know which particular prompt has driven people to either, brand consideration uplift, has driven people to think about you in a different way, has driven people in the end to conversion from a performance perspective, you're kind of really stuck. And in our current climate, we're making decisions around, look, where should we cut the budget a lot of the time? Because, realistically, times are tricky for all businesses, large and small. And I'm seeing already, and Jill would probably give voice to this too, we're seeing people make the wrong decisions. And that can be just purely going, hey, I'll take the Facebook ads grant, I'll run all my Facebook ads, and I'll just turn off search for now, because that's not free. And actually, it turns out, even though we're looking at a very small window now, we haven't got a big long attribution timeline to look at. We're seeing people have willfully made the wrong decisions, going after the free money and turning off the marketing that's working. And I think that's the bit that's, for me, is making me a little bit anxious today on Tuesday, the 7th of April. So it's not really even the bigger picture, hey, what are the challenges that the industry is facing? It's really literally, check your Facebook ads after this webinar, make sure you're tracking them properly, and make sure you haven't turned stuff off that should be very much on. And I suppose that's my right now snapshot, at least.
Yeah. What I like about focusing on the tracking is it reminds me of, and I forget what band it was, I'm going to butcher it, but they would basically have in there like their requests for going to a concert, and they would say like, remove all of like the brown M&Ms from our trailer. And then they would go in, and if the brown M&Ms were in there, then they would know that like there are probably other mistakes further down the line. Like they don't know if the stage is set up properly, because like if you didn't follow this one thing, then how do we know you didn't make mistakes in other places? And so by focusing on the tracking, and it's like, if you don't even know if these are effective, then how can we trust that anything else in the process is working appropriately?
Exactly, and it's really kind of it's quite tricky. I think the band was garbage, by the way, and I know that from another story. But the moral of the story is, of course, like you say, with your analogy in mind, bands have all these various different waivers, and if you're focusing on one thing, you are neglecting other things almost by default. That's just human psychology, and you find that within your business too. If you are a small business, you're wearing multiple hats, and maybe you are thinking about, look, the accounting, look, the sales, look, the marketing, the business development, purely running on a day-in day basis, the operational stuff, but you can't be amazing at everything at the same time. And sometimes we do bet on the wrong horse. That's just life. That's called testing. But hopefully we can change direction. But a bit to your point, it's the same, across teams. So, if the sales team is pumping out, which they are at the moment, a lot of performance marketing messaging, they're going, hey, buy it now, discount now, discount now, discount now. And the poor brand team have probably spent about 2 years building really high quality relationships and really high quality prospects, and they're going, why are you doing this? Why have you ruined our lives? And it happens again and again. And I'll give you an example, actually. I was in Mumbai a couple of weeks ago, just in time for pre-lockdown. And one of the guys who is the country director said to me, hey, my friend who runs Mercedes-Benz in India says that we shouldn't turn off our advertising. We should keep it all on. And I said, well, what is the nature of the advertising? What's the message? And he's like, well, you book a viewing. I'm kind of like, book a test drive. I'm like, why would anyone be booking a test drive right now? And kind of like, yeah, but the argument is, if they're spending money on advertising, we can be front of mind when the lockdown's over. And I'm thinking, yes, that's true, but I still can't book a test drive right now. And I can't book one in future because two things, we don't know when this is sort of over, so to speak. And your calendar on your website doesn't allow me to book ahead by 2 months. So there's loads of reasons why you shouldn't be doing it. But it is going to be this sort of tug of war to some degree as to how you decide which hat to wear and when. And this whole tracking measurement piece should help you do that, such as the hope at least.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so where do people start?
Honestly, start at the beginning. And it seems like a crazy thing to say, but I would probably sit down and itemize all of your marketing channels. And for many of you, particularly in smaller businesses, you'll probably find that's Facebook ads and email. A lot of the time, that's.
You said Facebook ads and email?
Yeah, mostly.
Okay.
Or if you are a B2B, you might have some LinkedIn running. But if we look at the numbers on the whole, LinkedIn advertising is a much smaller piece of the pie. And what you need to do really is essentially sit down and actually think about how your channels are structured. How do you ultimately describe them? And there is a process to it. I actually will give you a document to do this process for yourself in your business. And there's a few things you sort of have to remember is like, how does Google, say for instance, define the work that I'm doing? So if I'm doing Facebook, if I'm doing email, how does Google define Facebook and email? And okay, if Google's defining it in a certain way, then what am I doing with email? Is this a newsletter? Is this a promo? Is this an activation email? You call it whatever you like, and define that. Make sure that the system understands what you're doing with an email. And then if you're doing a particular campaign, a particular discount, or there's a particular asset within that email, okay, how do I tell Google that this asset is something that's important for me? So you sort of start with the big ticket, what's the big broad bucket I'm working in, and then dig into the look, what sorts of sources are pushing traffic, so newsletter or remote work academy, for instance, with you guys at AppSumo, among many other things I'm sure you're doing. And perhaps there's a tracking code that's associated specifically with this conversation that we're having, Chris. That's the ideal world, where you can kind of go back to AppSumo and say, hey, look, actually, we sent out an email about remote work academy. This email pertains to this particular talk, and they were particularly interested in this message, and tracking that back to the actual website itself. So in some ways, the place to start and the place to finish is the same. You're sitting down and you're identifying, you're listing out things that you are actually actively doing, and making sure that everyone is kind of on board with it before you start, technically speaking, troubleshooting anything. I found that the big issue, more often than not, is that people can't agree what to call things. And one of the examples that we think is kind of funny, it's a funny example. We were working with an agency, and one end of the agency was calling Facebook one thing, and another part of the agency was calling Facebook another thing. And it so happened, I said, well, we looked at the reports, we were doing an audit, and we were thinking, well, where's all the Facebook traffic going? And the PR team said to us, oh, we're calling Facebook FaceEB. And this was this hilarious internal joke. Oh, we call FaceEB. It's just so much fun, and it's kind of like we're so zany in this agency. Jill and I are just sitting thinking, oh God. And then they were doing the same thing for their clients too, and they should have just been calling it Facebook. You can call your campaign whatever you want, but making sure that everyone is aligned around, look, what is the actual definition of it? From our perspective is really, really helpful. And at the same time, making sure that some of those definitions match Google's. Because if they don't match Google's, you're going in, the report of broken dreams, which is just kind of where things that are misattributed go to die, and you can't really determine, whether that was a paid Instagram advertisement that did it or a paid Facebook ad. Google, for all intents and purposes, whilst Google Analytics is an amazing platform, Google's not really that invested in social. So you have to tell Google Analytics, look, these are the 30 or 40 things I'm doing on social, and I want you to report on them separately. Google will go, okay, I understand. I get it now. Now that you've told me, I can go off and do that. And also that it goes into a special Instagram paid report just for you. And you're like, yay, fantastic. But a lot of people, when they're beginning, to your question, when they sit down and go, hey, I need to figure this stuff out, they go, well, Google knows everything. So, of course Google knows that that's Instagram advertising, because how could you not know that that's Instagram advertising? That was my Google Home just telling me off, actually. Not even joking. I'm sorry, Google. I'm not being critical. But it is this sort of, you don't know what you don't know piece. and making sure that you have a good itemized list, which I'll give you, attendee folk, is definitely the start of that journey. And you'll find that even if you are a one-person business, it's a really good operational way just to make sure the marketing that you are putting a lot of work into is following through and is tracking through to your Shopify website, or indeed to your WordPress, or to your Squarespace. You do you, as it were.
So you want to start, you're saying, from like what are the ends of the extremes where like you're going to start with the big categories of like email and advertising, and then how far you drill down from, okay, you have advertising, then you have Facebook, and you have Google, and you have social, or like how far down are you making these descriptions and structuring them?
Well, it really depends on the size of the business and the spend, in truth. So if you are extremely dynamic, very large enterprise, which we tend to work with mostly at the moment, you have probably lots of different tracking mechanisms in place. But if you are thinking about our particular space and thinking about Google Analytics from a non-programmatic perspective, you are thinking about big, broad buckets. So you'll probably know that, look, email is of core importance. So that's an important medium. Social, very big, broad bucket social for Google, as I said. Affiliates are a thing. Referral, of course, so referring to websites that are, of course, directing traffic to us. Thinking about display, mostly in line with things like the Google Display Network, as was. We're thinking about other advertising, Bing and things like that. And indeed, of course, the things that Google likes very much, things like paid search. Now, if you are probably doing elements of all of these, and the degree to which you dive in and sort of get deeper, Chris, to your point, is entirely up to you. So for instance, if you go, look, we do a lot of social, I would benefit from knowing a lot more about how that social piece is looking. I need to sit down and figure out, look, well, how do I start to create user-defined channels so that I can then use the medium element of tracking for the purposes of reporting. So if I'm saying doing lots of Instagram ads, I might break it down into Instagram, paid Instagram, Instagram retargeting, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And then I'll automatically get a lot more rich data, a lot more observable truth, I guess, in my reports than I otherwise would. And equally, you might find other things are quite useful, even small businesses, things like employee signatures. Have you created a medium for those? Have you created a user-defined setup for it? Things like press releases. Often we speak to the comms teams and the PR teams, and the performance team automatically, of course, Google Ads will tell you, hey, this ad performed really well. But the PR team, might have got you on CNN. And they're kind of going, we got you on CNN. And you're thinking, well, did it make any sales? Oh, I don't know. I have no idea. And budget is allocated on that basis. But if they start tracking kind of, their press releases, they start tracking interactions with journalists, they start tracking interactions with policymakers, then you're in a better position to, one way or another, have a kind of a better view on the broad customer journey. So it depends what function you are in on the whole. We do lots of templates, and I'll create PDFs. So all of our PDFs are tracked specifically as a marketing channel, PDF. Google Sheets are tracked as a specific marketing channel. SMS is tracked as a specific marketing channel. You at Sonorous are tracked as a specific marketing channel, and so on and so on and so on. So it's about determining, if I'm putting a lot of time or a lot of money into something, that's usually where you should go deep. You don't need to go deep on, to say, display retargeting, if that's not something you spend a lot of money on. But if you start at the beginning and you are sort of constantly triaging, constantly updating the spreadsheet that I give you, you should find the opportunities as they happen. You can say, well, actually, we are going to do a lot of affiliate partnerships in the next sort of quarter. What do we need to do to make sure that our account is set up properly so that we can report on it effectively beyond what our affiliate partners are just telling us? And that, of course, as you know, always has to be done before a campaign or a program or anything communications-wise actually is enacted. And that's always the problem. People get to the end of the campaign and go, hey, I sold loads of things, but what happened, I don't really know. And kind of as they're mopping their tears off their keyboards, then they're kind of going, oh, I wish I had tracked. Oh, I wish we could look at. I find out at senior leadership the same thing. Oh, do we have the information around brand consideration uplift? And I'll go, no, you don't have that. Why don't we have that? It wasn't set up. Oh, It'd be really good if we could have that. Like, you can't, it doesn't work retroactively. Sadly, I'm not a time lord. So, we can't go back and fix the stuff that wasn't implemented in the first place. So it's just making sure, look, your ducks are in a row. You're deep diving on the stuff that's important for you now, but you are casting an eye to the future and keeping track on spreadsheet that I will ultimately give you.
So how long does it take for somebody to become proficient at this? Because I imagine there's a lot of people that are just like, the reason they're not doing it is because they're very intimidated by it. Like, Google Analytics isn't the most friendly thing when you first log in and look at it. There's a lot going on. So is that kind of what you see, that there's like the reason people aren't doing it is they're just too intimidated by it? They feel like you have to be really technical in order to get this locked down, and they'd rather just like create a design that looks nice and they feel good about it and they want to put it out, as opposed to doing all these pieces to it.
Oh, a shiver just went down my spine, Chris. I mean, I think there's always a couple of things in marketing. Look, we all love brand. I love brand, as you can tell. Creative is a thing. I mean, why be in marketing if you can't be creative? And we all want to build something that is, beautiful, that is user-friendly, that is well-structured. And, whether or not we're tracking it kind of often remains to be seen. We find that there's sort of two types of people in the analytics world for the most part, or in the marketing world, in the comms world. People who have a Google Analytics account and people who don't. That's it. And most of the people who do have a Google Analytics account, they open it up. They look at their favorite report, or they look at the dashboard more often than not. They look for a line that goes up, and then they smile to themselves. Yeah, well done, Aiden. You're awesome. And then they close Google Analytics, and they go back to writing whatever email they were writing. And then there are the other people who open Google Analytics. They look at the dashboard, they look at the line going down, they have a little cry. Then they close Google Analytics, and they go back to the email that they were writing. So more often than not, to your point about intimidation, people do open it. They don't really do anything with it positively or negatively. So they're either happy or they're sad, but there's no action taken. So in our, there is no point in opening it at all. But I kind of understand. I'll give you context on it just so that everyone sort of knows where I'm at. When I started building Google training, it was a 5-module course that we were building at the start. And I built the ads bit and the content bit and the customer journey bit and the trends bit. And the bit that I didn't build was module 4. Module 4 was measurement and analytics. And I couldn't do it. So I ended up doing it last and at gunpoint, because this course had to go live or I was going to get fired. And I thought, well, I've got to learn a lot about analytics very quickly. And I went into the Analytics Academy stuff that was sort of in its infancy at that time. And I sort of, I look at Justin, I look at Kristen, and they're kind of, Krista, sorry, I should say, and they're talking me through the concept that is analytics. And I go, okay, right, I'm ready. I can do it now. And I go off and look, and I open the platform, a bit like everyone else in the world, and I go, oh, okay, no, not my speed. I'll say things like, in my head, this might be the inner monologue. I'm not good at math, or, oh, I really don't like, Google Sheets or Excel templates or anything like that. It's not for me. I'm really more sales, or I'm really more creative. And to be honest, what you're doing to yourself when you go through that process is you're actually just sort of encumbering yourself a little bit. In the end, it took me 4 years to learn how to use Google Analytics properly. But in that 4 years, and in the hundreds of audits that we've done, we've got to a place where we can teach you how to do it from, I have just set my account up, I just learned how to spell analytics, through to I am very, 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 very awesome at Google Analytics in a 12-hour window. Now, there's a lot of work that you have to do to make that possible, for sure. And there's a lot of actionable things that you have to make sure that are implemented, and stakeholders that maybe you have to speak to, or clients that you maybe have to convince. But you shouldn't be intimidated by it, because it is so very, very worthwhile. And the question I often ask people, go, look, we don't have time. My boss won't let me do it. I'll go, would you like a pay rise? Would you like to keep your client? Any of these things good? Would you like to make more money? Oh yeah, all of the above. And I'm kind of thinking, right, well, then you need to go off and measure it. Because when it comes to appraisal day, and we've all been in an appraisal situation, you can either say, I did some marketing and some stuff happened, or I can say, hey, I, Aiden, have driven traffic to landing page Y by 80% increase on last quarter, producing 15 conversions and $75,000 in revenue. That's a very different conversation. And that means that you do get the promotion or the pay rise or keep the client. And that is what it becomes. It's not a question of, am I good at math or am I more creative? Because it requires both to make this work well. It's really more around, look, are you actually invested in APIs or OKRs? You guys do you. And to what extent can I demonstrate that the work I am doing as a human being is actually valuable? Mm-hmm. So yes, have the fear, but I assure you, speaking as a person who is not a quant in any way, the fear is unfounded. It is totally possible to be kick-ass at this quite quickly.
Awesome. I think that's very encouraging. So now they're on board. They want to do it. They have gone through, though, I guess you'll share that template so they can figure out how to do those definitions and all of that. Once they have that locked down, what's the next step for them?
Making sure that it's implemented. And that sounds it's a bit cheeky, I guess, to say that, Chris. But it is an operational piece. And it happens to me sometimes too, because I, being a human being, Jill and I often have this particular conversation. Jill will go, "Did you track the email?" "Oh, Jill, it's only to 5 people. I don't need to track the email. It's fine." And she'll track you need to track the email right now. And I'm kind of like, okay, fine, go on. I'll do it next time, I promise. And actually, it's baking it in to your everyday processes and your everyday approach to just how you speak to clients, customers, prospects, customer service, sales, journalists, whatever. That bit can be quite tricky. Getting everyone to agree, sort of at our first point, as we mentioned, is super important. Making sure it's implemented. Then getting everyone to do it is the next piece. And what often I find here commonly is people just mix things up an awful lot. They either mispaste something from the spreadsheet, as it were, or they mix up the order of something. And while fundamentally they are listening, they are implementing it, they're not implementing it properly. And oftentimes that's what we see with some brands that are genuinely, a lot of brands are trying to track properly. It's not just, we're not going to, it's not a pure dereliction of duty. But we're looking at it and go, oh, you're sourcing your mediums in the wrong order. Oh, crap. And these are seasoned marketers, and they're like, oh, damn. I'm like, yeah. So, just fix that, and it's all good, and it's fine. And we make our students email us with a sort of a dummy, but a real tracking code, and we error check it for them and send it back to them with corrections. And that is the single most common thing that we get. People are mixing up the order, and therefore they had implemented the tracking mechanism, so their chin tracking module for Google, but they just haven't done it properly. But when I say, hey, have you implemented it? They go, yeah. Oh no, I've tracked everything in the email. And then you go, look, and it's all wrong. And it's not their fault. They just, again, they don't know what they don't know. So it comes back to that particular point. Get agreement, first thing. Make sure it's all listed in order. But then still there's quite a lot of human error, and making sure that actually it is baked into the daily process. So if I was responding to a particular partner that was, particularly important, I should be tracking that response, even if it's purely just me going, oh, actually I put our proposal here and I'm linking off to a Google Doc. I need to track that. And it's just purely, it could be a 1-for-1 engagement, but it'll, when I turn around and go, and I used to do this when I was a PR a fair bit, I'll go, hey, did you read my proposal? Did you look at my report? Have you seen my dashboard? They'll go, oh yeah, it was really interesting. And I can go, you didn't click on the link. And they'll go, no, I did. I'm like, you didn't, because I'm tracking the link and you haven't clicked on the link. So it can be a matter of embarrassment for senior executive leadership as well. So just brain training yourself into always applying tracking to every single link you send to everyone ever is very, very helpful. And it also makes sure that when it does come to something that is very important, money is being spent, a campaign is going live, a big launch of a product, you do it automatically. And it's not a matter of, oh, I can't remember if we did the tracking or not. It's kind of just, oh, of course I've done the tracking. Don't be silly. And it doesn't even become a question anymore. It's just something like breathing that we do when we're firing out campaigns.
Mm-hmm. So are you doing that? That's just being built. Basically, once you have everything set up, the majority of the work is then just creating all of the links anytime you're sending something out. Is like, okay, I'm doing this. Now the only real thing I have to do to keep up to date with all my analytics is build a proper link, and then I just insert that as opposed to just doing the general link. Is that accurate?
For the purposes of UTM links for Google Analytics specifically, yes. Now, of course, you'll have different variations across all the various different analytics solutions that all work fundamentally differently, but pertain to do the same thing. And so, for instance, if you're using Adobe Analytics, you are thinking about your tracking slightly differently, if you're doing Salesforce slightly differently, but provided you are implementing it to one degree or another, you can say, look, hand on heart, this, I know for a fact that I've run a Twitter advertising campaign. My campaign source is Twitter, because of course it is a platform. It is paid social because I'm doing an ad campaign, and it is a new product live. And perhaps potentially the content, if you wanted to call the content something particular, promo 87D, up to you. Suggest a probably more user-friendly name on that one. Like Black Friday sale is more useful than 57D. And what our document will do that I'll give you, will spit out the code that you need to add to the particular piece of collateral. And that's it. You just have to make sure that everybody does it. And beyond that, you are in a nice place. You have begun. Now, we haven't obviously talked about troubleshooting any of this, but in principle, as you say, Chris, you would be correct to assume that getting everyone aligned, making sure that it's all listed and tracked, and making sure that everyone implements it should be at least a very strong start to your journey into marketing and measurement with Google Analytics, for sure.
Awesome. And I guess I think you kind of already answered this. I'm wondering, so say you're setting up an email. Previously, you were just like not doing any tracking, and now they've worked with Aiden. They're like, I know what I need to do. I need to be tracking everything. How specific are you getting with this? Like, are you tracking image clicks, video clicks, like hyperlink text in the email? And is it more so like only if that's something you're trying to improve upon, or is it like every single interaction somebody could have, like you want to be able to track?
And I'm really, really pleased that you just used email as an example, Chris, because that means that I can go to town on this. There's two ways to do this. You can look at your calls to action and go, hey, look, I'm going to track the things that are important calls to action within my email. And that can be absolutely anything at all. If it was, a direct to consumer fast fashion, it might be new product launches. Or you could go a little bit further and go, hey, I'm going to track 20 products that I put into this particular email, which would be a bit more extreme. Or a little bit like me, you can track everything that is interactive. So anything that would direct traffic to anything else gets tracked. Now, I appreciate that can be a little bit of extra lifting. I promise you it's not heavy lifting. The first 4 or 5 emails that you set up rules for will be annoying. It will take time. You won't turn it around quite as quickly. But as you continue to do it, it'll be a lot faster. And in ways, it's kind of, look, what is your actual appetite? To what extent do you want to understand, potentially in addition to your email service provider's metrics, what people are doing in this particular email? And I'll give you an example. I used to do reactivation campaigns for Weight Watchers in the United States. I was given your little laugh there, Chris. I assume that you are acquainted with Weight Watchers. It was a long time ago, to be fair, so I'm well out of the scope of my NDA, so I don't even care. But it is. We were testing lots and lots and lots and lots of email, and I wanted to figure out which foods, supposedly forbidden foods, triggered people to reactivate their Weight Watchers subscription and go to their local meeting once again. So a little bit of online and offline combination there, a little bit of attribution in play. And I essentially changed all of the headers around. Now, normally I wouldn't bother to track the headers, at least at that point. And I just wanted to know, hey, look, which food particularly was driving people to get into that old call to action. And it turns out, actually, I'll let you guess, Chris, which food do you think, which forbidden food drove most conversions for Weight Watcher reactivation?
Man, I'm thinking either ice cream or pizza.
I actually thought ice cream, but steak.
Really?
I know, madness. For some reason, people thought, sort of insight here to the observation, people thought that steak was a forbidden food within the Weight Watchers ecosystem, and therefore, didn't continue with their Weight Watchers membership beyond a couple of months they were churning out. That particular item within the email pair tracking being implemented was 86% more effective than the 26 other forbidden foods that I had been forcing people to look at. If I had gone, hey, I'm going to track all the buttons, I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't have learned that information. I would have seen the traffic to the website, certainly, but I would have got broad brush reactivation campaign, not, oh, it was the steak email. And knowing that, of course, I can roll out steak into social media advertising, into display advertising and beyond. because I know that the steak thing is a pain point for our audience. And the value delivery for me then was like, convince you that you can have steak. And so it's up to you. It depends how rich your content is within email. You are, and I know there's trending towards more text-based emails these days, purely just text. You still have to track those links. If you're in e-commerce, chances are, if you're Walmart or whatever, you will probably want to track absolutely everything that's not nailed down. But you have a team for that rather than one poor little person in a corner building tracking links. Hopefully anyway.
Yeah. Well, what I love about this is that like it makes it so you don't have to be that good. You just have to pay attention. Like you don't have to know off the bat that steak is the thing that's going to work. And you don't have to rely on being just like hyper creative or being able to see into the future or understand what's going to happen with a million different interactions. All you have to do is be able to measure and then let reality tell you what the case is.
Pretty much. And I mean, it's a funny old one because obviously the observation was, geez, steak is really popular here. But the insight was maybe we're not communicating the information in the right way. And so, there's loads of things you can take from it purely than just facts. I mean, if we look at facts, I guess, for fact's sake, we can go, look, hey, I'll run a campaign and New York, for whatever reason, is performing better than Texas. Okay, great. What do I do with it? Don't know. But I know New York is performing better than Texas. I'm like, that's really lovely. That makes a fantastic pie chart. But what ought I to do with that? Oh, actually, there's a real density of marketing and advertising agencies in New York. Then, maybe we should run a tailored campaign for people who are, who are like that, who work in advertising agencies for New York, because we know that they're interested in our particular product or service. That's sort of a true story, as it were. Because you can look at the data purely as it is. And in some ways, the developers, excuse me, developers in the room, I love you, I appreciate you greatly. That's all I want to say. But there are, we look at spreadsheets. We become spreadsheet jockeys a little bit, particularly those of us, in the MBA room, kind of like, right, well, spreadsheet. And we sort of forget that from a marketing perspective, the stuff that we pull out of Google Analytics isn't just numbers. These things are people's behaviors. And what we automatically end up doing there is, if we're just tracking and reporting on the numbers, is we're losing the empathy, we're losing the potential insights, and we're losing the potential, frankly, award that we could win on the basis of that particular insight. And at the end of the day, I can tell you to what degree which email worked, but can I improve that email to drive business outcomes and to give us more revenue remains to be seen, depending on the richness of the data that I've got to hand.
I love that.
To validate that back in a really unwieldy way. It takes a village to make it work.
Yeah. So how do you, I guess, if you're implementing this and say you've been doing it for a while and you've been doing it wrong, do you unwind all the mistakes you already made? Or is it more so, like you were saying, you can't apply this stuff retroactively. So it's like, you just kind of got to fix the stuff moving forward and then ignore all of the stuff that was kind of created before you were coloring and departmentified. Yeah.
I mean, it's, some people don't want to know how the sausage is made, as it were. I kind of do, but I guess to your point, it's quite interesting. You cannot retroactively apply the changes that you would make. And sometimes I'll say that to a kind of a conference room full of people, and you can audibly hear the sigh, just like a, oh, crap. And it's mostly because, I haven't done that. The brands that haven't applied tracking at all are actually okay because they can sort of fix it ongoing. People who've been doing it wrong for years have slightly higher mountain to climb, as it were.
Bad habits.
Bad habit. Well, it depends on the size of the business, but you could have hundreds of people with bad habits in some cases. Naming names. But it's kind of just sort of to create a culture where you can now do it. What you can say, whilst your year on year is going to be a bit weird, because if I compare April this year to April last year, and I'm tracking properly this year, and I was tracking incorrectly last year, I can't really do a like for like, at least one that's accurate. And what often happens is people go, oh, now that I'm tracking properly, all the stuff I reported on last year is wrong. I'm like, it's not wrong, it's just misattributed. I can't show that to my boss, I'm going to get fired. And the question that I often ask is, look, I get that, you don't want to look like an idiot, because I want to get that pay rise, I want to keep that client. But it's sort of like, to what extent do you want to be correct in future? Do you want to make the right decisions in future from a budgetary perspective and from a marketing and advertising communications perspective? Some people just go, oh no, actually, I'm not rocking that boat. And so people go, okay, right, this is a really good opportunity to course correct so that in future I make much better decisions. And sort of two sorts of people there. There's a little bit of fear, frankly, in correcting oneself too.
Yeah. Well, especially if the numbers are worse off. If you were doing $10,000 a month last year, but you were actually doing 3,000, it's like, ooh, I don't want my department budget to get cut in a third.
No, and it is, and it's like that. I mean, it's like that episode of The Office, you know, around surplus. Don't tell mommy and daddy that it costs $10 to run the lemonade stand. Tell them it's 10. Oh, but it's 9. But tell them it's 10. So you kind of do have to appreciate that it's weird that we're talking about what is essentially a computer program, but it is a political computer program in that it has material business impact and it helps you shape your decisions ongoing. Because as you say, you know, if you turned around to your direct line manager and said, hey, look, actually we're down 400% on last year, but that's because I foolishly didn't implement tracking, they're going to kind of be either this person is not quite up to the job, or they willfully have misled me in order to make it seem like they're doing a better job. Either way, there's a real breakdown in trust there that can kind of happen. Where, you know, but to some extent, I've seen in other businesses, people go, you know what, this is great, now we know. Now we can fix it. And there's a sense of empowerment around it, where there might have been fear.
And I also think that, you know, if people aren't doing this properly, I think a lot of people might know that they're not doing it properly and they're just kind of like doing it because they think they're supposed to do it, but they're not even really confident in the numbers that they're looking at versus like actually having the confidence. Like, I know the numbers I'm looking at are accurate. I know this campaign is doing well. Now I feel more comfortable doubling down on it as opposed to just being like, I have numbers, but I kind of think they're 80% inaccurate. Like, yeah, like you're saying, I think it is a lot more empowering knowing like this is absolutely accurate and I can go forward and make decisions based on reality.
100%. And you know, it is kind of like thinking about the future trajectory. It's not really around looking in the rearview mirror too much. It's more around planning ahead of how can we win the race in the end. Because, you know, it's a bit of an old adage, probably a broken record too, loads of analogies there. It's, you know, did it better will always kind of be did it first. So, you know, you do have the opportunity to make up, I guess, the distance between you and the perceived distance, should I say, between you and your competitors. But you do have to understand what's happening in a more robust way. And it can be
How often do you find that when you go in and you correct it, it's doing better than it was previously reported versus it's doing worse?
Half of the time.
Okay.
And it's not a better or worse, because a lot of the time the revenue will still happen. It's just that we can't build a journey that dictates, look, where did this person become aware? Where did they get most of the information in the consideration stage? Where did they end up buying, and what did they do next? We can't build that picture. And the most sort of, I guess the example that sticks in my head the most there was working for a very, very large FMCG client in the US. And they had one agency for paid social and they had one agency for paid search. Now, bless them, they were both tracking. The problem was that the paid social people were tagging all of their paid social cost per click, because as we know, sometimes you pay for paid social, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, beyond, on a cost per click basis. So they were putting the links in as they were told to do, and they were saying, oh, this is cost per click advertising, which it is. The thing about our beginnings, as we mentioned earlier, is how does Google understand what we're telling it? And Google sees cost per click as paid search, because of course Google's always going to favor itself. That's just the way the world works. And what happened at the end of the quarter was that the agencies were called in by this very large FMCG, and the FMCG goes, wow, paid search, you guys, I mean, that's like 2,000 ROI, that's insane. Well, the return on advertising starts. And the social media teams kind of like, guys, what have you been doing this quarter? I mean, as far as we can tell, you know, you've pretty much done, I mean, some lovely creative, and we got lots of retweets, it's great. But, you know, no sales, you know, they're gonna have to cut your budget. And that can mean budget, that can mean headcount. And you know, the paid search team got their budget doubled. So it's a actual real case. They got doubled and social media got halved. And as it turned out, about 6 months later, so it wasn't immediate impact because social media can sometimes have quite a long burn, attribution-wise. 6 months later, so 2 quarters later, sit down and they go, oh, actually, paid search wasn't performing quite the way we thought it was performing, as suggested by the numbers. And it turns out paid social was actually assisting in a lot more sales than we gave it credit for. So we incidentally cut that budget a little bit prematurely and a little bit too deeply. And what it did end up having, whilst overall the marketing spend was the same, there was a 12% impact on actual conversions on the direct-to-consumer website, because they didn't account for social impacting performance appropriately at all. And I mean, very, very large Fortune 100. So it's crazy when it happens, but it does happen.
Wow. Yeah. How do you get because if somebody's watching this or people are down for it, how do you get that company-wide buy-in? Because it doesn't sound like it's something that you can necessarily, unless you're the only one using GA, it doesn't seem like something you can do on your own. Like you do have to get that company-wide buy-in where everyone who's doing these different marketing channels needs to be following kind of this same protocol.
Yeah. I mean, if you can, and I do encourage everyone to sort of champion this measurement approach and lead by example, even if you're very, very junior within the business, that doesn't matter. You should measure you well. And hopefully demonstrably better yourself. Your line manager pays attention, and their line manager, and so on and so on and so on. You will, as with any kind of potentially this is change for your business, will need in some ways a senior stakeholder or a member of the senior leadership team to endorse your project. Let's call it your measurement plan. Now, it's not purely tracking. Tracking naturally is the conversation topic for this particular hour, but there is a much bigger measurement piece that has to be in play. Our Google Analytics course is built around building one, but it's more than just tracking, and it's who is involved as well. So if you start at the beginning with your organization in mind, as we said, it's agree on, work out what are the mediums. And by that, of course, we need things like, our paid social. Do we need to create that? Our sources, our campaign tagging structure. So what do we call our campaigns? You can call them whatever you want, so long as you tell Google. So that's sort of part one. Then, if you do need to create new rules to match Google Sheets or press releases or whatever you're doing, go off and do that and create them within your reporting view in Google Analytics. And then, of course, a lot of the time you're starting to think and look about multi-channel funnels and about thinking about, look, how can we just sort of build this better? And it means more often than not, you won't be implementing it yourself. Tracking you will implement yourself because it's externally orientated. You might not be implementing some of the other things that are important with Google Analytics and campaigns and marketing and advertising in mind. You might need to brief dev. It might be that actually your command of JavaScript is not quite there in terms of tracking advanced e-commerce, as it were. You will have to pull in dev. You will have to speak to some engineers at some point, probably, when this goes up to scale. And you will have to involve kind of the comms team, the sales team, and beyond, because it might be that they're just throwing PDFs, white papers, we'll call them, out at prospects, and they're not being tracked properly, or they're being mistracked, or whatever it may be. So it's sort of creating this culture where if we're all measuring effectively, we're all better together. It's not about shining a light on someone who's doing a bad job or making someone look good in another department. It's kind of just around everybody in quite a collaborative way, making sure that all the work we're doing is validated and is represented effectively to senior management. And a big journey, if you're a small business, you're looking at 2 to 3 months to implement tracking and measurement as a whole. But if you're a bigger organization, you're looking at more like a year. So it's not a full change project, strictly speaking, but it is certainly a deviation from the norm that does need to be planned for. You will need to take time over to thoughtfully analyze with your colleagues, with your team, and saying, making that case to your line manager is often one, as I mentioned earlier, with the revenue example. That's how my angle, Mike, would you like to make more money? Yeah, okay, I need 3 days to build this out over the next month, sold. And it can often be as simple as that, but it does take a village, and you are not working in isolation. Unless, of course, you are, you run a smaller business and you are kind of the only guy or one of a few people, then you can kind of, I guess, dictate what the tracking is going to be. And then as you scale, fingers crossed, from there, then you're in a better position to make sure that it's stuck to by being virtual boss.
Yeah. No, I love that. Are there any tools that you use or recommend? I know you said that. Is it typically just done in Google Sheets? I know one of the deals we've done on AppSumo's Jot URL, where you can basically save the templates for your UTM structures. Do you use anything like that, or you keep it simple?
exactly the same premise, Chris. To be honest, it's one of 27 templates so that we use just for Google Analytics. So I wouldn't, I'm not within one particular document. It's not going to change your life entirely. It will change your tracking, but not your life. We tend to document absolutely everything, and a lot of our, our resources are available on the website anyway. I'll just grab you a link to it. And it is about 20 of them that are ungated, so I don't want your email address or anything like that. But I do encourage you to use them. I've just popped them into the Zoom chat. They're also
awesome.
On
you sent it to just all panelists. Can you send it again to get everybody?
All panelists attendees. You think I would know how to use Zoom by now? So there's lots of resources there that we do use to guide clients to it, and they vary in degrees of complexity, of which this conversation is a mid-range one, but it goes right through to kind of custom dimensions and data import and so on. They're also on the Remote Work Academy landing page that you all signed up to. So if that is more convenient for you, I really just ask that you use them. I don't really want anything else out of it other than you to use them, because it'll make our broader marketing measurement mission come true. And it'll mean when I'm sitting taking screen grabs of people's advertising, hopefully I'm taking screen grabs of yours because it's so well targeted, and all the tracking is correct. That makes me happy, truth be told. Our mission, of course, is to kind of empower people to do the stuff that seems complicated, turning marketing away from the coloring in department notion into a revenue generation department. So please do feel free to fill your boots on those. There's quite a few of them. Don't try and do them all in one day.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to checking these out. These look super cool. Thank you for sharing this. Where can people connect with you and find you? What's the source on thecoloringindepartment.com?
Yeah, you can go to coloringindepartment.com, or you can hassle me on Twitter, entirely up to you, or hassle me on LinkedIn, or connect up on LinkedIn. Should I say not hassle? It's also, of course, on the Remote Work Academy page too. But do feel free, if you do have any questions, clarifications, or anything that you do need, or you'd like pointed to a resource, I'm more than happy. It's absolutely fine to do so. I'll enjoy.
Awesome. Well, Aiden, thank you so much. This was super cool. Gave a ton of value, and now ending off with a ton of value. So I hope everyone will go check these out, get stuff implemented, and head over to the coloringindepartment.com. Awesome resources in there. Aiden, thank you so much for joining this morning.
You're very welcome, Chris. Have a great day, everybody, wherever you're at in the world.
Awesome. Take care. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.